Hey guys, how's it going? Paragon here. Today I want to give you guys another Diablo 4 build guide. And this is for the build that I am most leaning towards for the season launch just a few days from now. We have Season 3 coming in and giving us Seneschal minions, which interact with characters in many different ways. And I think I've crafted a pretty awesome build for kind of like a classic, but it is a new version of playing it. It is the Blizzard Sorc, but it is the never lucky Blizzard Sorc. And it is not just named as a novelty this way, it is a Blizzard build that actually doesn't get lucky hit anymore. I haven't really seen anyone make the build this way, and we're using a few different tools and options that are now given to us in Season 3. So we have the Seneschal construct. The way that I have it set up is with lightning and arcing for high uptime, and we want the uptime on burning damage. This is a huge boon for sorcerers because just about every Sorc build uses the Firebolt enchantment, which now you no longer have to do. You can get burning activations from the Seneschal pet. And we don't really know if the Seneschal pet is going to do a lot of damage or little damage or nothing or who knows. We don't really know how well it'll scale. We do know that it should have, with the right setup, high or full uptime on the effects that you enable. So we're going to enable burning damage and we're going to enable vulnerable. And those two things fill pretty big gaps, particularly for the Blizzard build. We're also using Slash. Again, I don't know if these are the absolute best abilities because we don't have any experience with the Seneschals and we don't have full detailed information on all of these, but I believe Slash is a super fast and low cooldown ability, so we're trying to get just pow constant triggers of 15 primary resource. This should be a big part of resource recovery. We want to get 15 crit chance, which is huge, and a little bit of damage reduction. Coming in from Season 2, there are some things to talk about. Just about all builds lost half or much more than half of their damage because the vampiric powers are honestly insanely overpowered. While the Seneschal construct I really doubt it's going to double your damage. It does give you utility aspects, but it's back on you to kind of make up for that loss in damage with the rest of the character. In Season 2, we had three-ish Sorc builds. We had the lightning Sorc builds that had to do with using or proccing ball lightnings, which has been insanely nerfed. I would probably bet that the build is close to dead at this point because Blizzard really wanted to nail it on this one. We had the firewall-based builds with Xfall, without the firewall meteor, lucky hit synergies, the ultimate fire Sorc build guide that you can also get on Mobalytics, home of the KRIPP'S builds. So we also had Blizzard, and it turns out that Blizzard was almost as good as ball lightning. And from what it seems, Blizzard actually lost the least from those builds. How could that be, you ask? Well, they changed one thing about Chain Lightning. It was very popular that you use Chain Lightning as an enchantment, so when you spend mana, it'll proc a Chain Lightning, and there was an ability where it gave you some mana recovery from those Chain Lightning hits, or you had it from Unstable Currents. They changed it, they bug fixed it, they said, so procced lightning skills no longer give you the resource recovery effect. So not only is the ball lightning damage completely gutted, but their resource generation is completely gutted as well. Good luck to that build. However, Blizzard Sorcs also used this resource mechanic. And one thing that I'd say all Blizzard builds used is kind of a lucky hit based mana recovery mechanic to kind of fit in there as well. So, what does that mean? What that means is that I tested it, and the lucky hit proc rate of Blizzard is horrendous. I think that the vast amount of resource recovery that people were getting from the Blizzard builds was actually from the interaction with lightning skills that is no longer possible. So I think it is time that Blizzard builds switch and drop all lucky hit in favor of other stats, which makes a pretty interesting playstyle, because if we're not looking for a lucky hit, well, we can have barrier generation, for example, which now works on the cooldown use barrier generation passives, which is pretty sweet. We can do a lot of different things, in fact. It might be pretty tricky to maintain the resource costs of the build, but Blue Rose has a pretty high value mana cost reduction on it. You probably will have to use the mana costs, the mana gained when you use a cooldown aspect. But if you get a crazy amount of primary resource from the Seneschal somehow, hopefully with this setup, but maybe another, you will be able to use a rare ring with the new Ice Blades enchantment, which gives you another 25% damage multiplier. And this build has a lot of damage multipliers. Before we get into the multipliers, because this is a build that I haven't played at length yet on stream, and because it is not a build that I've highlighted yet, let's just talk about how it works. So we have Ice Armor on the left click, so it can automatically trigger. Teleport for getting around. I'm a big fan of 5 points in teleport, and there's more reason than ever to have that because it is the best proc for Tybalt's Will, which is the best pants in the game for like all classes. We have Flame Shield for some immunity, but I like speccing it for a little bit more movement speed, which gets converted to crit through Esu's Heirloom, and a little bit of mana cost reduction as well. We're using a Blizzard as the main catalyst for our damage, but it is not actually doing that much damage directly, which is why we only have 1 point in Blizzard. We have Deep Freeze, which helps to give us another immunity cooldown. It does pretty good damage because it's proccing Ice Spikes, and we'll get to that in a second. And we have Ice Blades, which gives us cooldown reduction, and we're also using the Ice Blades enchantment to get constant Ice Blades as we use cooldowns. And all of those Ice Blades have a chance to reduce the cooldowns of all of our skills when they attack. So this is not like if you played the server slam pre-launch Diablo 4 thing, the whole Ice Blades infinite cooldown thing, that's not possible anymore. We're not relying on Ice Blades to give us non-stop crazy cooldown usage. But I think we'll get several of them up at any given time, which I think will help significantly increase the uptime or permanently give us vulnerable uptime, chill uptime for crowd control damage activators, and also, a little bit of cooldown reduction from flat sources can go a long way. I'm also using the Frozen Orb enchantment. We don't need to use a burning damage because we have the burning support on the Seneschal. Now, just about all the damage comes from ice shards, and the ice shards the ice spikes that we are using from Blizzard are from the glacial aspect. This aspect has a flat amount of damage assigned to each ice spike from Blizzard based on the item level of the aspect. What this means is that this build doesn't really work until you have a high item level glacial aspect. So this is not a build you can level with. And that's not a challenge for you guys to play this build and level with it. This is just not a leveling build. I'm going to be playing a Firewall Sorc, and near the end few levels, or depending if I get lucky and get a really high Isle of Glacial aspect, perhaps I will play this build a little bit earlier. We also need to use the aspect of the Frozen Tundra. So while a Deep Freeze is active, you get Ice Spikes from Deep Freeze, but the second line, your Ice Spikes have 50% increased explosion radius, applies to those that are procced from Blizzard. We have Disobedience for some armor. We have Exploiters because we're going to want a little bit more crowd control. This is on the chest. So if you want more survivability, you can use like less damage while in Blizzard. A lot of options for the chest, very flexible. I like exploiters because I've seen like this similar build, again tuned for season 2, take on like Abattoir of Zir, which is like the pinnacle crazy tuned content of season 2, and the mobs that were the hardest to kill were really tanky rare monsters, and really tanky rare monsters were unstoppable like half the time because they'd get instantly frozen when their unstoppable would drop, so they don't do any damage, and then they're unstoppable for a few seconds. So this 20 to 40 increased damage to them, this is actually a multiplier. So it's giving you a multiplier to the units in the game that give the build the most trouble. But honestly, this build was taking on some of the final levels of Abattoir Azir. You might not need the damage, but we'll see how the content challenges the build soon enough. Tal Rasha cannot really be replaced on any Sorc build. The Blue Rose, again, you're just kind of trying to manage your mana. Blue Rose is a good option. It adds a little bit of damage, but I think it's very flexible in the slot. Essus for some more crit. Increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier, and increased damage while you have a barrier. So we're just casting blizzards. We're spamming blizzards. We're dropping cooldowns. We get the ice spikes. The ice spikes are doing lots of damage. That's kind of the idea behind the build. But the blizzard itself is not doing the damage. The damage is from the flat value of the aspect, which we have on the amulet for the 50% bonus. And this also means that the weapon and offhand, their damage doesn't really matter. It's a pretty interesting build. Like, if you find a perfectly statted, like, item level 800 one-hander that for literally any other build would be complete garbage, for this one, it's really good because you want the stats more so than the damage values. So the gearing is a little bit different than most other builds. We do have the full defensive lineup, Align the Elements, Mana Shield, and Protection. We rarely see 3 in each of those, but I love 3 in each of those. We get critical strike damage multipliers from Devouring Blaze because the Seneschal is applying burn. And we're going to have Insane Clear, although the damage is a little bit delayed from Blizzard spawning Ice Spikes, from Shatter. So after Freeze expires, enemies explode for 25% of damage you dealt to them while frozen. This is an enormous amount of damage. Avalanche gives you higher damage of Blizzard, but it doesn't affect the damage of the Ice Spikes from Blizzard. It's not Blizzard doing the damage. And it gives you like up to 10 or 20 double, because it's vulnerable, to make a free cast. Again, I think people are grossly overstating the lucky hit procs of this build. Blizzard has a terrible lucky hit chance. It's for the entirety of the duration. In my opinion, it's not scaling lucky hit very well at all. Ice Blades has okay lucky hit, but still pretty weak. Frozen Orb has abysmal lucky hit, but Frozen Orb, the explosion gives you 5 mana when hitting a frozen enemy, and you get a free Frozen Orb 30% of the time when you use a non-basic skill, which for this build is all of them. So that's pretty nice. One thing that I think deserves some attention and a little bit of a pat on the back, I have exhaustively taken a look at all the Blizzard builds I've been able to find. And for this version, that again doesn't utilize Lucky Hit, I made a Paragon setup that I think is the new ideal for Blizzard builds. So we're using a 6-board setup with 2 legendary nodes. We're using Frigid Fate, and we are also using Icefall. And we're using those boards first, which is really good, because if you do get a Blizzard aspect early, you can play the build. One aspect that I don't use is Adept. So Adept gives you 20 area and damage with your mastery skills, but it doesn't affect the damage of the ice spikes, so that part doesn't matter. And the 20 area actually spreads out the ice spikes more. The ice spikes, it's like a set number over time during Blizzard. If you have a higher area for Blizzard, it actually lowers the damage. It intensifies the damage of the concentration of the ice spike. So it's actually kind of bad. One glyph that just about everyone used was control, because it's easy to apply like chill and freeze. And while it is easy to apply chill and freeze, bosses and rares are not chilled or frozen a whole lot of the time. So I am using Elementalist in the main first board because it's just hyper efficient. I'm using Ice Spikes in Frigid Fate because, again, the positioning is very efficient. I am using the Winter Glyph, which shouldn't work on bosses, but most bosses are really large units, so they get hit by a disproportionately large number of Ice Spikes. Bosses melt with this build. This is a crazy bosser. But against non-bosses, you are going to get this effect. When you chill or freeze an enemy, you get 3 cold damage multiplier up to 15 multiplier for 10 seconds. So against those really tanky rares, they are going to go like unstoppable, but they're not going to go unstoppable for 10 seconds. So you actually are going to have full uptime of this, which is really nice. Using a defensive skill, I think Tactician is very strong. We use the crit damage because we have crit multipliers all over the place in the board. That gives us the most crit multipliers. And we're using damage to burning. Again, these are all very easy conditions to meet. The damage is not very conditional, and it's a type of build setup that I've really fallen in love with from playing a Firewall Sorc in Season 2. We're moving on to Blizzard in Season 3, and I think it'll be an amazing build. So if you want to check it out, make sure to check out the written guide on Mobalytics and the link below, and we'll see you on Tuesday.